Hello, everybody, and thank you for watching PoliceTube. Let me introduce you to the person that Jeremy referred to as she, Monique Worrell. She's the state attorney for the Ninth Judicial Circuit in Florida, prosecutor's office of Orange and Osceola counties. So that's the Ninth Judicial Circuit Court for the state of Florida. She was elected in November of 2020, and she's serving as the chief prosecutor in both Orange and Osceola County. So she's the chief prosecutor overseeing both all of Jeremy Dewitte's cases. So when Jeremy agrees to a global plea agreement, that's all being agreed to in this state's attorney's office in both Osceola and Orange County. Now, Jeremy, when documents are being signed, they're not being signed by Monique Worrell. They're being signed by the assistant state attorneys, so her assistants. You may remember hearing about them like Colin Moore or Lauren Jablonski Demers or Justin Collins. Those are the assistant state's attorneys that sign all the documents in the court. And in the court, you've been dealing with two judges, basically, Keith Karsten and Renee Roche. And those are all under the same Ninth Judicial Circuit. So those two judges, Keith Karsten and Renee Roche, those are independent judges that oversee the cases that are being prosecuted by Monique Worrell's office. And of course, these are the prosecutors that prosecute the crimes. And otherwise, we're talking about the sheriff's office who puts together and arrests the criminals and puts together the investigative material to send over to the prosecution, the state's attorney, in order to go through with the prosecution. On the other end, you have the deputies that arrest and find the criminals. So in this case, let's say Orange County has a sheriff's office that covers all of Orange County, and it's supposed to be headed by the citizens of Orange County, and they elect the sheriff, John Minna. Now, John Minna, as you know, he basically appoints his undersheriff, Marcus Canty, to be in charge of everything. Sheriff is in charge of everything, but he's the politician. But Mark Canty, he is the actual law enforcement officer that oversees everything. Now, under the Mark Canty, who's the undersheriff, you have the chief deputies. You may have heard of Chief Deputy Larry Zweig. He's often referred to as C.D. Zweig, or Zwig, however you want to pronounce it. He runs a part of the department, and then Operational Chief Services Bureau Nancy Brown. We never hear about her, but those two chief deputies work directly under Mark Canty, the undersheriff, and they control all the majors. You may have heard of the major Robert Anzueto. He was in contact with some of the captains. So underneath the majors, you have the captains. The captains work for all the majors. Each captain has a number of lieutenants that works for each captain. And underneath each lieutenant, you have sergeants, and then corporals, and then the basic patrol deputies. So you may remember the corporals like Corporal John Ramsey, one of the motor officers who's involved in the case. And you may remember the sergeants like Sergeant Keith Vidler, who's involved in the case. And that's why Jeremy's always saying, get me a lieutenant. And he's telling the lieutenant, get me a captain. He'll tell the captain, get me a major. And then he'll tell the major, get me the chief. And then he'll tell the chief, get me Mark Canty, the undersheriff. Now, he never says all that, but here's the thing real quick. Whenever they want to make an arrest, like any of these corporals or sergeants want to make an arrest, they want to contact their captain or their lieutenant, and their lieutenant always wants to run stuff by their general counsel up here, who reports to Mark Canty and John Minna. The general counsel is Austin Moore. So Austin Moore is basically the one that's deciding if the arrests down here by the deputies, the corporals, the sergeants and stuff, if all of them are legal and legit. Austin Moore is working at the behest of the undersheriff Mark Canty. So these are the people that are prosecuting Jeremy. I'm sorry, getting the case together to prosecute Jeremy, and then they send it over to the state's attorney's office, which is headed by Monique Worrell. Now, this global plea deal that's happening, Jeremy says he did a lot of negotiation with the state, and she was very kind. When he says she, he's talking about Monique Worrell. So we know that when Jeremy Dewitte was arrested, for example, on March 23rd by Sergeant Keith Vidler and Deputy Reeves for carrying that pepper ball gun, one of the first calls he made when he was arrested was to Jennifer. Jennifer called Amir. Amir called Marcus Canty. And Marcus Canty, the undersheriff, put the things in motion with his general counsel, Austin Moore, to make sure that the arrest was uneffectuated. That way it wouldn't violate Jeremy's bond and he could remain free. And in the meantime, Amir was also working with the local courts here in the 9th New Judicial Circuit, all through Monique Worrell and her office. Here's her Facebook page. Lots of video pictures here. She's a supporter of the presidency. Here's some of her campaigning stuff. Somebody was running a very nice campaign for her. We're going to be looking into her because ultimately she is the one that is allowing this to not be prosecuted. She has the ultimate say of what kind of cases are and are not prosecuted. This is the state attorney, Monique H. Worrell of the 9th Judicial Circuit in Orange and Osceola County. She says here, black men get 25% longer sentences than white men for the same crime. Yet, why is she signing off on Jeremy Dewitte getting an 18-month global plea deal for these things that he's doing? Because any other person would not allow that. So why is she allowing that? Why is she allowing that? Now, she holds elected office. She and the sheriff are both working at the behest of the citizens. So theoretically, they're supposed to be doing what the citizens want. Is this what the citizens want? Some say, yeah. You know who says that? The citizens that are saying, yeah, this is what we want. Some citizens say, Jeremy Dewitte serves a very important function in the community, and they don't want Jeremy to be locked up. So the citizens have a lot of sway here, especially specific citizens that might know Monique Worrell specifically, or that might know Marcus Canty, the undersheriff specifically, or that might know the elected sheriff John Minna specifically. People reach out to these elected officials and say, hey, hey, hey. And then the elected officials are like, hey, hey, hey. And then they're both like, hey. And that's how it's done. So that's just a basic primer. I just wanted to introduce you briefly to Monique Worrell, because ultimately she's the one at the head of this 18-month global plea deal in both Osceola and Orange County. So thanks for watching PoliceTube, and as always, have yourself a great day.